们，大家好，欢迎收看本周的对话好莱坞，我是主持人是旺。熟悉我们观众的朋友可能知道，我们去年采访过一位多次拿到奥斯卡音效大奖的音效大师 RichardAnderson 先生。今天呢，我们的老朋友又回到我们节目当中，这次是带着一个崭新的身份——制片人。我们即将和他谈一谈他最近即将11月在洛杉矶和纽约上映的《铁血残阳》这部片子和他接下来更多的计划。Hi, Mr. Anderson. How are you doing today?
So
nice seeing you again.
Everybody.
So nice seeing you again.
Yes, nice to see you again.
Last time we talked mainly about your career in sound effects and your Oscars, and this time you're here as producer, director,
yes,
filmmaker.
Yes.
So let's first talk about the film that you're having that's going to be in theater in November in LA. That's exciting.
Right.
So 铁血残阳.
Right. Or in English, it's called Behind Bayonets and Barbed Wire.
Wow.
Which is based on, it's a little long as a title, but it's based on a quote from General Wainwright, talking about, well, it was part of a speech he gave after the war.
Okay.
But,
so what's the story about?
It's about American Army prisoners, well, Navy, I should say, American military prisoners of war who were surrendered to the Japanese in the Philippines in 1942. And then later the Japanese sent them to Shenyang up in Dongbei to work as basically slave labor in factories where they made war materials, which was against the Geneva Convention, but a lot of the things the Japanese did at that time were against the Geneva Convention. So, but they were there until the end of the war, and they, lived under really bad conditions and low, not enough food. And it was not a happy place.
Right.
But what I found interesting about the story is that they did, even though they were controlled completely, every aspect of their life was, they were always under guard or, in a prison or something. Even when they went to the factory, there'd be guards and things. But nevertheless, they did everything they could to rebel against the Japanese, to try and win the war in whatever way they could.
I mean, this is a part of story that people, the majority of audience are not familiar with. Like, they're not written on our historic book and everything. So what inspired you to pick this topic for the documentary?
Well, the documentary came out of a script which I wrote, I'll call it a Hollywood version of the story, which we still want to do, which we're trying to get the funding for. Okay. To make it with actors and
to make it like a narrative film.
Yeah, a narrative film, exactly.
Okay.
But in the meantime, we got some money from the local government up there to make a documentary version of the movie, which was released last fall in China under the title that you mentioned for the 70th anniversary of the end of the war. And then, but I said, this is a great story and I think Americans would like it because it's not just about Chinese people. So I always wanted to make an English version of the movie. Now, when I say English, of course, the people, we interviewed all these guys who were actually there. They're now 90-some years old, so.
They are Americans.
Yes, and but it's and it's really important that we get their stories, filmed because they're all old. They're 90 years old. In fact, one guy died about 2 months after we interviewed him. He died.
Oh.
Yeah. So. Anyway, their story was really interesting to me, and I think it's a good story. It's about bravery and standing up to oppression and things like they would, on purpose, try to screw up the factory operations as much as possible, to break machinery and stuff, because they felt that was one way they could fight the war.
During all the interviews, did you remember how many interviews did you do for the documentary?
We did a lot of them.
A lot of them.
A lot of them. Some we did were with the children of the people because their parents had died.
And passed away.
Right. We did, I think, 9 interviews originally, and then we went to a convention in New Orleans where a bunch of these guys and their children get together every year.
Oh, okay.
And so I got a bunch more there.
How long was the process?
We worked on the filming part was from May of last year through July.
Okay, so about 2 months.
Couple months, yes.
And that's basically doing the interviews?
Mainly the interviews, because we did the interviews in order to see what the stories would be, because we didn't know the stories.
Yes.
And then went and filmed recreations of some of these stories in Shenyang. In fact, the scenes that were set in the prison camp were filmed in the actual prison camp, in the actual buildings, because today it's a museum. You can go, if you go to Shenyang, you can see this museum. And so they let us shoot in the actual place. So
that's nice.
Yes.
So did you remember any of the stories that were like especially impressive in your mind when you were doing the interviews?
Well, mainly like just that these guys would do everything they could to like I said, to break things. To like,
like
they
what?
would make a part a little bit off size, you know, so that if you're just walking by and you looked at the part, it would look normal, but it might be a little too big or a little too small, so that when the Japanese would try and use it in airplanes later or something, it wouldn't fit, it wouldn't function. Or they would literally, when they were setting up they were sent there, and the factory that they worked in wasn't set up at the time. So part of their job was to set up the factory
itself.
So there'd be these sort of like lathes and other, precision machinery and things. And so when the guards weren't looking, they would take the gears out or pieces and stuff like that and destroy them.
I'm curious because now that we think back to these stories, this sound like more of adventurous stories that are interesting for us.
Right.
But for them, obviously, probably painful, probably bad memories. When they
That's part of the story.
When they recall the memory during the interviews, how were they feeling?
Well, I found most of the ones who are still alive had sort of a generally positive or upbeat approach to life, which is maybe one reason that they survived longer.
Yes,
I can't say.
Yeah.
But amazingly, most of them were forgiving. That's one of the things I most found amazing about the movie is that most of them were fairly forgiving about the Japanese, even though they were treated so badly for 3.5 years. They were beaten, and their friends died. A lot of them died in the camp, not by the guards shooting them or something like that, but just of the disease because they didn't get enough food. And they also did medical experiments on them. They didn't realize it at the time, but the famous G&E group,
G&E group,
yeah, they came down to the camp.
Like biochem.
Right. They did experiments on them, though they didn't realize it at the time. They just thought they were doctors, but they injected.
But how did they find out later?
It came out after. Well, some of them got sick and died and all.
Right,
and
because of the
other
experiment.
ones. There was one guy we interviewed his daughter. He had died, but he had medical problems for the rest of his life that they couldn't really explain.
And he assumed.
It came out in some sort of secret paperwork or something came out, because there's a whole thing where the U.S. government kind of covered it up a little, they say, in return for getting the results of what they found. But some paperwork was turned out. In fact, that's mentioned in our movie, and there's a new thing. This new version of the movie that was not in the Chinese version last year has a Japanese researcher who has new information showing that this really happened. So that's in our movie. It's an exclusive.
It's an exclusive
as you
for
would
the
say
US
in the news
version.
biz, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's for the U.S. version only.
Yes, because this was filmed recently, just in fact about a month ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So U.S. audience will have a new part of the movie that they can watch. That's nice. Well, that's a beautiful project that you were doing. I mean, although that wasn't your first intention, you know.
Well, like I said, my main focus is more on narrative films. Yes. That's my background. I like documentaries. I find them very interesting and all, but that's, and in the end, it's all about telling stories.
Yes.
Regardless of whether you use real film and real people or you use actors, it's about telling a good story.
So, did you do any shooting in China for the film?
Yes, there was a lot of shooting done in China. I had a co-director working with me.
So the recreation
yes, in fact, it was shot at the actual camp.
Yeah.
And in the actual barracks and some of the actual buildings that were, because it's a museum, things were preserved, so they let us shoot in the actual place. So.
So logistic-wise, is this your first time working with a Chinese crew?
Like, no. I directed a film about Genghis Khan in 2010.
Oh, okay.
It was for one of these, I call it like a Disneyland ride film, you know, where it's sandy and big, and it's going to be on a big curved screen, and the seats move and all like that. You know, it was supposed to be in a theater in yeah.
So how was working with Chinese crew like for you? Because you've been working with U.S. crew for so many years.
Yeah, well, they seem fine to me. They're the ones I worked with seem very competent. They're all very hardworking.
Yes.
Tough work.
Any difference you find? Well, I heard.
I'm trying to think.
I heard that Chinese crew work even like harder than U.S. crew.
Well, I was going to say they worked
overtime.
They worked really hard and really long hours. Yeah. And a lot of the amenities that you would have on a U.S. film, if you're shooting in the middle of nowhere, obviously if you're shooting at Warner Brothers, you have a lot of facilities available. Yeah. But if you're shooting in the middle of a field in say Wyoming or something, there's no bathrooms there and things. So in an American film, they would bring in porta potties and all that.
Different kind of facilities.
Right. Okay. There was more things like that. Whereas in this film, it was kind of like, well, there's a field over there.
Oh my goodness.
And dressing rooms and things like that. We didn't have things like that. So, but everybody was really hardy and really worked hard. You know, stood up. It started getting pretty cold near the end of the shoot in Nemongo, and everybody we bundled up and. Because we do night shooting, you know, and it wasn't as cold in the day, but at night it got pretty cold.
That was a memorable experience.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's great. It was fun too. It was like, because on the crew, everybody was Chinese, you know, Han Chinese mainly from Beijing. Yeah. Or Mongol from that area.
From Mongolia.
Yeah, I was only Uyghur. So, but after a while, you kind of forget about it. You just you're the crew. You're working on the movie, and you know, we're all working together, and you don't really think about.
It's just the team.
Right, the differences.
That's beautiful. Are you working on any project that you are willing to share with us? Just a little sneak peek.
I have a suspense thriller love story feature film that I've written that I'm trying to get going. It's the main leads in the film are Chinese, but it would be shot mainly in the United States. I call it my Hitchcock film. It's kind of like a Alfred Hitchcock film.
Okay.
In general feeling.
That vibe, yeah. But what's the story, if you?
Well, I can't tell you the story.
Not only like just the topic.
It's about a guy who's a professor in China, and his old friend
Wait, as a young professor or
middle-aged?
Middle-aged. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think there's many 21-year-old professors.
Yeah, just want
Yeah,
to.
and his friend his friend dies, and maybe they say it's suicide, but he comes to the U.S. to find out what happened.
The truth.
Yes,
Okay.
his the widow, who turns out to be his old girlfriend also.
Oh, okay.
And so he investigates the thing, and he uses all his power and abilities, to. What I wanted to do was make a story where we all see like 007 movies, right? And
Yes.
you have a guy, or kung fu movies, and everyone knows all the martial arts, and
Yes.
James Bond has all those things where his pen becomes a gun or explodes or whatever. All these kind of cool things, right? I wanted to make a movie where an average person who doesn't have any of this kind of stuff, who doesn't know how to do kung fu and doesn't have guns and all this kind of thing, gets involved in a situation, shall we say?
Like that.
Yes, and has to use his brain to get out.
Also, brain power.
Brain power, right.
So,
And
brain power version of
right,
double.
and objects
007.
around him, but objects that would be there, not like specialized, exploding iPhones or something like that,
That sounds very interesting.
So that's the concept of it. It's a modern day movie.
Oh.
Yes.
And it's targeting the Chinese market.
Right, but there'll be obviously Americans in it too, because it's set in the United States. So it's sort of an international film.
It sounds like a very interesting story
Yeah,
for me.
so that's a film I'm trying to get going.
Yes.
Like all film projects, basically you need to find a studio or money funding source to say, oh yeah, let's do that one. So
are you going the indie way, or are you going the studio way?
I'll go whatever way it takes. Whatever way it takes.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah, right, exactly. So.
Right, so, and I heard you're doing a story on Dr. Henry Lee.
Right, I have
Li Changyu.
Yes, exactly. I've known him for many years now. We talked about doing a series many years ago and wrote some stories. So, right, that would it could be done as a series of into small features, or it could be done as a TV series.
So it will be about his.
But it'd be about his cases that he solved. Though we're somewhat fictionalizing them because we don't want to deal with the hassles of having to deal with actual people, and then they say, "Oh, well, that's me. I'm suing you. I want $1 million or something because my." So you just fictionalize the stories. Henry Lee his character, of course, would be real.
Will be himself. He will play.
Well, we would get an actor to play him because these cases took place when he was a middle-aged guy, and now he's 70-something.
But he will be part of the.
But he would be part of
it.
He'd probably appear in the film briefly.
So he would basically authorize.
Yes, he's authorized us to do it, and he is going to prove all the scripts and all the thing to make sure that everything is all the technical stuff is accurate. We don't want to do anything that's fake. So it's to be entertaining, but also show the scientific side of CSI work.
I'm just curious. You are the director or like producer in the film right now, but then will you pay extra attention to sound effect because you were such an expert in it?
Probably, yeah.
But like for example on this film, did you?
I didn't do it work myself.
Okay, but did you like pay extra attention? Like, this part was not good enough. Go back.
I don't know. I find I pay attention to all the parts.
Okay.
But probably because that's I'm
your
experienced
expertise,
at that. I spent 40 years doing that, so I'm used to dealing with that. But, on the other hand, it made it easier because I know how to do it. There's certain things that maybe digital technical things or something. I might understand the basic concept of what they're doing, but I don't know the details of exactly how they do it. But
you're happy with the sound effect,
Yeah, I came out well. Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah, it came out well. Yeah. The important thing is big explosions, big explosions.
I'm sure it will. I mean, it sounds like good stories.
You know, there's a whole thing in there about, you know, like in some cases we have, you know, black and white film that was shot during the war period or something. And it was either shot silently or if it did have a soundtrack, it was pretty lo-fi because of the technical gear at the time and the fact that it was real, you know. So you run this question, so how do you approach the sound for something like that? Do you make it as it was, or so anyway, my approach was to make the sound full and modern, to kind of try and overcome the fact that it's black and white and sometimes grainy, or you know.
Oh, that's your expertise.
So, but anyway, but that's an approach, you know. Some people would say everything has to be very, quote, realistic, you know. It has to be exactly the way it was or something. So, but anyway, I decided to make the soundtrack more full and like a Hollywood movie, and to overcome the fact that we have some cases the film, the black and white stuff is, you know, a little lo-fi.
Nice. So this will be in theater November 11th.
November 11th in LA, which is Veterans Day.
Oh, right.
And also, November 11th was the day that the POWs arrived into the camp in Shenyang.
Oh, that's nice. It's a very meaningful day.
Right. And then it will be open in New York the following week on the 18th.
Okay. So you hear November 11th in theater. Which theater do we decide?
In LA, it's the Music Hall.
The Music Hall.
In Beverly Hills. And in New York, it's Cinema Village, which is somewhere in New York. I don't know. I don't have the address.
But go there.
Anyway.
Support a movie, support a history.
Right. And by the way, one last thing. In the real story, the Chinese, there was a lot of Chinese and some Koreans who worked in these factories also. And the Chinese, as much as possible, also tried to help the Americans by giving them sometimes some extra food and things that they needed. And they tried to work against the Japanese. But it was very dangerous because if they got caught, they could be shot. And some of the Americans were sent to that got caught were sent to camps in like lead mines in Japan, which were really, really bad. If this was really bad, that was really, really bad. So, but they did it because they felt it was important.
And it's in the film?
It's in the film.
Thank you so much for sharing with us all the stories.
I'm happy to see you again.
Happy to see you again too.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.